Hello, everybody. Welcome on Mysteries with Mr. Belgic. I'm here tonight with Mr. Ned Dehan. How are you, Ned?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Jerome?
I'm fine, thank you. I would like to say hi to Dark Side of the Moon, Sharon. Hi, my with me. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And there is a lot of nice people who contribute to the channel. And Warwick, hi. So we are today to talking about a new subject because it's a new new format that I'm doing with Ned because Ned had accepting to doing that with me. And today I've asked Ned what was the subject you want to talk about, and he told me, "Oh, I'm really glad to talk about the Long Island serial killer." I was not a lot aware about this case, so I'm going to learn a lot about this case tonight with Ned because Ned had a great knowledge about this case. But I have made a little introduction to talk to you about this guy. So here we go. The Gilgo Beach serial killing were a series of murders spanning from the early 19 until 2011. Many of the victims' remains were found over a period of months in 2010 and 2011 during a police search of the area along Ocean Parkway near the remote beach town of Gilgo in Suffolk County, New York. The search was prompted by the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, who, like many of the known victims, was escort, who advertised on Craigslist. Craigslist is a privately held American company operating a classified advertisement website with section devoted to jobs, housings, for sales, item wanted, service, community service, gigs, resume, and discussion forum. The, the perpetrator in this case is known as the Long Island serial killer, the Monorville butcher, or the Craigslist stripper. The remains of four victims designated the Gilgo Four were found within a quarter of miles of each other near Gilgo Beach in December 2010. Six more sets of remains were found in March and April 2011 in Suffolk and Nassau County. Police believe the latter sets of remains predate the four bodies found in December 2010. Gilbert remains were found after a year after the remains of the Gilgo Four were discovered, approximately 9 miles from where the 10 sets of remains has been found. Authorities believe Gilbert became lost in the marshland and died either from exposure or accident drowning. As of June 6, 2024, Rex Urman, a Manhattan architect and resident of Massapequa Park on Long Island, has been charged in the murder of six women, each of the Gilgo Beach Four victims: Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainard Barnes, as well as Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla. According to his indictment, Ehrman is under investigation for the 2000 death of Valerie Mack. Ned, it's on you.
All right. Well, Jerome, thank you again for having me on your channel. This is very nice. And hello to everybody in the chat. Now, Jerome, you started out by saying that you are not extremely familiar with the story of the Long Island serial killer. That's fine, because I used to do a regular segment about the Long Island serial killer on my YouTube channel, Black Box Online Radio, but we're still learning about this. The news is still coming out. This is one of the stories that isn't like the Zodiac or Jack the
No.
Ripper. This is one where we are following an ongoing investigation. And if you go back to all of my old episodes about the Long Island serial killer on Black Box Online Radio, 90% of them, you'll hear me say, well, it's believed that the first Long Island serial killer crime occurred in 1996. But just earlier this year in 2024, we have now had a DNA match between the suspect in custody, Rex Heuermann, and Sandra Castillo. And let's start right there. Sandra Castillo was murdered in 1993, and the only real interactions that I had with that case is that I've been contacted a couple times by her ex-boyfriend, and he just wrote into the channel Black Box Online Radio in the comments section. But she was murdered, and I was just watching an episode of Court TV about her case, and she wasn't mutilated in the same way that some of the other victims were. She had 25 sharp injuries, so they said, which I can only gather is some type of stab wound or some type of wound with a very sharp or bladed instrument, and her legs were spread and her shirt was taken and pulled up over her face. That's the murder of Sandra Castilla in 1993. In 1996, we had the murder of Karen Vergata, and she was widely believed to have been the first Long Island serial killer victim. Karen Vergata was not only murdered, but she was dismembered. And by when I say widely believed, I mean this is before all of the DNA developments with Sandra Castilla. And for years, Karen Vergata was known simply as the Fire Island Jane Doe. A couple was out walking in New York and they stumbled upon a pair of legs, and then later a skull was found. That allowed people to draw a composite sketch of the unidentified woman who was known until 2023 simply as the Fire Island Jane Doe. Last year, a DNA match identified her as Karen Vergata, murdered by the Long Island serial killer in 96. Then we are going to go ahead to 97. This is a very odd case because this is the story of Peaches Jane Doe. She is still unidentified to this day. They aren't even 100% sure what her race or ethnic background is. Maybe she's an African American female or a Hispanic female. Peaches Jane Doe was not only murdered but also dismembered. Parts of her remains were found near the other victims that you talked about, but some of the other remains were even placed into a trash can. But she gets the name Peaches Jane Doe because she had a peaches tattoo on her body. Now, this is important because this will relate to a lot of the behaviors of the Long Island serial killer later on. It doesn't seem like he wants tattoos around with some victims. But after 97, we're going to go all the way to the year 2000 and talk about one of the victims that you mentioned, Valerie Mack. Valerie Mack was known as Jane Doe number 6 until 2018 when she was positively identified via DNA. Valerie Mack was murdered and dismembered, and as you said, her remains were put onto the Ocean Parkway. Well, not the Ocean Parkway. It's Gilgo Beach, right? It's the beach that is near the Ocean Parkway. Her remains were discarded. And then in 2003, we have another very similar crime, the murder of Jessica Taylor, where she is murdered, dismembered, mutilated. Jerome, I was watching this stuff on Court TV last night, and I just had those moments when I'm just like, you
Yeah,
know, when you
it's a
talk
lot.
about true crime all day, every day, it just hits me just like the sickening nature of humanity. But
Yes, this
all
is
these
just
women are just murdered, cut apart. And the thing with Jessica Taylor is she had a specific tattoo on her body that said Remy's Angel. And this was something that the killer did not want to leave behind, so he cut the tattoo to shreds. And there's a very famous photo of the Remy's Angel tattoo, and that was actually put together by the medical examiner. I didn't know this for the longest time, that the medical examiner took the skin fragments and recreated the tattoo. So that's why if you go on Google Images, you'll see something that looks like a tattoo that's been cut up, but very clearly you could recognize it. Anyone could recognize it because it was recreated. This is in 2003. Then, Jerome, something very bizarre happens. We have a large gap all the way to 2007. 4 years.
yeah,
Maybe the Long Island serial killer was operating, maybe he wasn't. There are perhaps some possible incidents, but there's an unconfirmed crime that occurred in early 2007. And it's really the discovery of a woman's remains. And her name is Cherries Jane Doe. Much like Peaches, she has a fruit shaped tattoo on her body. not of peaches this time, but of cherries. Part of her remains were found in a suitcase, specifically her torso. Other body parts were found in different places. I mean, it's quite possible that that was the Long Island serial killer. We simply do not know. It is believed that Cherry's Jane Doe is an African American female, and as we're going to see, race is not going to be much of a factor with this particular serial killer. That's just a discovery in March of 2007. Moving to July of 2007, this is the start of the Gilgo 4 murders. Maureen Brainerd Barnes is murdered. And the Long Island serial killer is now doing something very different. He is now strangling the victims, not mutilating them, not dismembering them, not cutting them apart, not even doing what he did to Sandra Castilla, the 25 incision wounds or whatever. He is strangling the victims and he's discarding their bodies on the Ocean Parkway. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was the first of the Gilgo 4 in 2007. And in 2009, we saw the second one. This is the murder of Melissa Barthélemy. Again, abducted and strangled. Then we're going to 2010 with the murder of Megan Waterman. And that's in mid 2010 thereabouts, and then later on in the later part of 2010 we have the murder of Amberlynn Costello, and those four victims are called the Gilgo Four because they're found on Gilgo Beach and they were strangled and not mutilated. And then this is the big discovery in December of 2010. There is this serial killer graveyard that's happened upon, and they find all of these remains on Gilgo Beach near the Ocean Parkway in Long Island. But you brought up something very important, and that is that in between the murders of Melissa Barthélemy and the murder of Megan Waterman in 2010 as well, the early spring of 2010, we have the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert. And this is the event that started everything. Shannon Gilbert calls 911. She says she's in Oak Beach on Long Island. Okay, she didn't say that. She just said she doesn't know where she is. But she was in Oak Beach on Long Island, and she just said that some people were trying to kill her. She disappeared. She was found dead in a marsh ultimately, but on the other side of the parkway. And it's very, very tragic story, but that's a basic introduction to the Long Island serial killer mystery. And we should also point out that there are lots of unconfirmed victims. There's the Asian male doe, and there's also the murder of Tina Folia in 1982 from the 1980s. So there are lots of unconfirmed crimes that could be connected to the Long Island serial killer. When did the Long Island serial killer first start operating? We don't know. As we said, this is an ongoing case. But as of now, I mean, the first confirmed crime was in 93 based on the DNA evidence.
Oh, it's it's massive. It's wow. It's a lot. Um, yeah. What do we know about this guy? About the perpetrator? Do we know some about his childhood, his history, his personal life?
If you're talking about the suspect, Rex Heuermann, who is currently in custody and is going through the legal process, I first want to preface this by saying that he is innocent until proven guilty. He has
Yeah.
not been convicted of these crimes. But when you have the news saying that they have DNA links from the suspect on multiple locations and multiple crime scenes and multiple victims' bodies, I think he's going to be found guilty. He was 59 years old when he was arrested in 2023. I mean, he's 6 feet 4 inches tall, and as some people say, he's frequently the largest person in the courtroom. Not only is he very tall, he's also very wide, and he's just a very, very big man. And this is surprising for some people. They don't necessarily think that serial killers would fit this type of mold. A lot of people have this concept of how a serial killer is a sad little man and is just someone who isn't very capable of fighting back. Lots of serial killers are large. Keith Jesperson, the happy face killer, was 6 feet 6 inches tall. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, was at least 6'9".
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes serial killers can be of this profile. But he was also someone who wasn't just living an ordinary lifestyle. He was an architect, so he's coming from an educated background. He was someone who was extremely meticulous with his planning. And this is something that I think that is almost kind of widely accepted about Rex Heuermann. He probably enjoyed the planning process as much as he did committing the murders. He would make serial killer checklists and go through things, which some people call the recipe for murder, where talking about the items that he needs, talking about how he needs to scout out an area, look for surveillance cameras, how he needs to destroy certain pieces of evidence, how he needs to cut up the tattoos of the victims. So this is something that is just very, very plotted out. And he also scanned the dump sites. So if you look at a map of Long Island, you'll see that the Ocean Parkway kind of goes down on one side of Long Island, and it goes to a very, very secluded area in Gilgo Beach. And then the that's just a place where he wouldn't have been interrupted when he was discarding the remains of the victims. So, what do we know about him? Just the basic stuff that I have stated. To the best of my knowledge, he has not made any statements to the media. He's featured on camera a lot, but he is not currently talking right now. His wife has also filed for divorce, and he was married with children. And it becomes really quite unclear about the wife's involvement in this because, as you stated in your introduction, Jerome, these women were working as escorts. They were um, they were found on the internet primarily, to the best of our knowledge now. And it seems like she may have been involved with that. She was sort of like aware of the swingers lifestyle. There are a lot of videos online. Even Nancy Grace has videos about this, talking about how they were involved with the swingers lifestyle. So she perhaps knew that he was interacting with these women, but I don't necessarily know her involvement yet. We're just going to see how this plays out.
About the psychology of this man, what are your observation? Because I know you are already not great on that. So somebody who start to dismember woman, and after he changed his MO, and first, yeah, what kind of serial killer we are facing of this kind of serial killer who dismember woman? It's
This is what John Douglas would call an organized offender.
mm,
And Rex Heuermann, I mean, he wasn't an impulsive serial killer who just is kind of walking down the street and all of a sudden he has the urge to hurt somebody. There
no,
are serial killers out there like that, such as Kenneth Harrison, the Boston Giggler, as well as Gary Gene Grant, Seattle's unknown serial killer, forgotten serial killer. But with Rex Heuermann, it really appears to be quite different. He is the type of person who not only would study true crime cases, he would also incorporate things into his planning from true crime books. One book that they said he kept very closely by was The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas, the same FBI profiler that I just mentioned. Now, this has been shared all over the news. And I've done multiple book discussions on The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas on my channel, Black Box Online Radio. And it talks about different true crime stories, the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and JonBenet Ramsey, to name a few. And I have direct responses to each section in the book on my YouTube channel. But I don't necessarily know what he would have learned from that book specifically, other than the stuff about being organized versus being disorganized. The disorganized offender is somebody who doesn't have a plan, really. Those are the impulsive serial killers that I just listed off. Henry Bush would be another example of a disorganized serial killer, someone who just all of a sudden feels like he has the urge to kill. With Rex Heuermann, it appears that he was dealing with some very intense animosity toward women, sexual frustration, and it's also done in a very calculated manner. He is somebody who owned 27 computers at least. When they raided his home, they recovered at least 27 computers, which also would have included small handheld computers. But he kept lots of records. He tried to destroy them, but they could still get them back. So I think that this is somebody who really put an enormous amount of effort into the planning process because he did not want to get caught. He's not one of those people who's just throwing himself out there. It's like whatever happens, happens. And I don't think that he was dumb, but I heard a very interesting statement from someone named Dr. Scott Bond, who wrote the book Why We Love Serial Killers. And Dr. Scott Bond was saying that he thought that Rex Heuermann was actually somebody who did not have a good memory, who wasn't good at recalling things. That's why he kept such extreme notes and all these checklists. Whereas some people, some serial killers like BTK, Dennis Rader, could recall things with extreme detail.
Yeah.
Samuel Little, as well, maybe the most prolific serial killer in America. I don't think so, though. He could also recall an enormous amount of detail. He just really retains it all. And I think with Rex Heuermann, he could not. So he had to keep all of these notes. So I'm thinking there's could be some type of insecurity going on. And one final point. Dr. Todd Grande did a psychological profile of the Zodiac Killer, and he also did one of the Long Island serial killer with the Zodiac Killer. Dr. Todd Grande said that the Zodiac was extremely low in neuroticism. Low in neuroticism. He's not worrying. He doesn't care about leaving the bodies where they are. He'll just get in his car and drive away. The Long Island serial killer was listed as average in neuroticism, meaning higher. So he does care about how he leaves the bodies. He does care what he does with the bodies. And he is also worrying about these things. And this is also insecurity.
Yeah, that's really crazy. The, this kind of people who are really evil. So I'm going to make a check in the chat. So I'm going to start from the beginning because I don't want to. Yeah, I'm fine.
Hello,
Hi,
Sharon.
Hi Sharon.
Hello, Warwick. Dark Side. Hello. Hello, Haynes Anthony. And hello, Cowpoke. And Sharon says, Warwick, you need to say hello twice. Plus, Jerome's surname is pronounced hello. Do you actually say that?
Yeah.
I thought it was
Hello.
hello.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, Jerome, hello. Okay.
Hello, Jerome. Hello.
I was always saying it like hello.
Yes, it's more like hello in
Well, Sharon's
French.
from Scotland, though, so I think that would work out for her. I'm from West Virginia, so not the same.
No.
All right, yes, but sometimes
Yeah.
we can say twice.
If you have any question for Ned about hello, Mark.
Mark will watch later. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate you too, Mark. Fire Pixies is here.
And hello, Fire Pixie. Always nice to see you.
Oh yeah, I want to say that if you have done so already, please to subscribe to Sharon's YouTube channel. We are the Voices, hosted by Sharon, and I will doing a big shout out to Jess, who is a lovely Bampot from Scotland, who had a where the channel since ooh, 5 6 years, and she is talking about different case, but not really known case. This is case that's you never heard about, and but it it is really important to talk about all these cases that we don't learn, you don't hear, and so for that, Jess is doing a really great job. And Shannon, if you can put a link in the description, is Jesse Rose. Oh yeah, here, Jesse Rose on YouTube, and yeah, subscribe to her channel because she's really nice. Megan, hi Megan.
Hello.
I hope you are doing well. So Yeah, we can maybe continue about
Ah,
this
yes.
guy.
And Megan says, what are we talking about today? We are talking about the Long Island serial killer. Now, Jerome, we had this big news breakthrough in 2023 about the list, Long Island serial killer, and I think it's something that's going to impact the story for the rest of time. For example, in 2018, there was this breaking story about the Golden State Killer. There was this story just about how they had solved the case via DNA. Well, what happened in 2023? We got the news. I woke up and my phone was full of messages about people talking about the Long Island serial killer breakthrough, that they had a suspect in custody. But then, as we were reading the news, we're like, well, wait a second, what is the news really saying? Did he commit all of the murders? At the time, he was only charged with three of the murders. And what's really odd about this case is that we have the murders that occurred from 1993 to 2003, where the victims are either mutilated
Yeah,
or stabbed in some way. And then from 2007 to 2010, they're only strangled. And he was only charged with three of the murders of the Gilgo Four, and they were just calling him the Gilgo Beach Killer in the news, not even the Long Island serial killer. So we were just thinking, well, did he commit all of them? Because this is important. For the longest time, people were debating the fact, is there one serial killer or are there two? Is this just perhaps maybe two serial killers using the same graveyard, the same dumping site? Because as I stated, that part of the Ocean Parkway is very, very secluded. It kind of goes across, and then there's this little almost rectangle that it makes where it
yeah.
goes down into a very secluded area that's cut off from the rest of Long Island. And people were
I
just
have the
debating about
picture
this
here.
right
It's
here.
just, yeah,
And like as you see, there's like water almost on both sides of the road.
yeah,
And people were just like, well, now there could be evidence of two killers. Now, Jerome, you know, because I followed the Zodiac case, that I don't entertain any of the unconfirmed crimes. I've looked at the multiple killers theory, every which way it comes. But with the Long Island serial killer mystery, I had to make the determination ultimately that I thought that there was one single serial killer, and that maybe there's even an unconfirmed crime that could have been attributed to him that has not been confirmed yet. And that wasn't Sandra Castilla. That was the murder of Cherry's Jane Doe in 2007. I think there's a very high chance that the Long Island serial killer committed that crime, but it was just such a big change where the women are not only mutilated, as you put out, they are dismembered. Their bodies were cut apart. The killer's making very specific efforts to destroy certain marks on their bodies, not only the tattoo, but this is another thing from Vinny Politan, citing the source, where I actually got bothered, sick to my stomach, where he wrote in his notes that he wanted to remove the marks of torture on the bodies before he continued the dismemberments. And I was just like, it's inhumane.
yeah,
But then, for some reason in 2007, the killer switches from mutilating and dismembering the bodies to just strangling the victims, and at least two of the victims were found in burlap. Now, this is most likely rolled burlap. If you were to read about this, you're going to see stuff in countless places on the internet where they state that all of the victims were found in burlap. A lot of sources that go under the surface say that at least two victims of the Gilgo Four were found placed into burlap, so as a type of material that is frequently used in gardening and nurseries and so on. But I also want to share something, Jerome. With the Long Island serial killer, this guy Rex Heuermann was not mentioned on any of the suspect lists. And this is something that is indeed similar to the Golden State Killer case. Paul Hull, the most famous investigator from that one, stated that he was shocked when they learned about the DNA evidence that incriminated Joseph D'Angelo, because what he was saying is that he thought there were better suspects than D'Angelo. And I mean, that's just the long and short of it. He thought that this was going to be somebody else,
yeah,
but it wasn't. And, I went through the suspect list on the Long Island serial killer case multiple times. I've done individual suspect episodes on some of them. And, There was even a prime suspect in the case named John Bittrolf, who's a real life murderer. And guess what? This it turns out it's most likely going to be an architect named Rex Uerman, who was arrested at age 59, and he was not mentioned anywhere on the internet.
Crazy, crazy. And yeah, how you can explain this change of MO?
I've gone over it a lot in the past about why he would switch from mutilating the bodies to
Yeah,
strangulation, and I looked at the basic possibilities. Number one, convenience. Maybe it became too much of a hassle. Number two, he could have thought that he could get away with it without doing all this extra work. So maybe a killer growing in confidence. Number three, it could have been something like he had some type of injury, perhaps to his hands or to maybe his knees, and it's not practical for him to mutilate and dismember a body. And one that I even thought of, this is just pure guesswork, that he lost the location where he was dismembering the bodies, maybe a house or something like that, a garage that had a sink in it. And I don't necessarily know if that's true because it seems like Rex Uerman was staying in the same house for a very long time. I'm talking about all the episodes that I made prior to 2023. And here's an interesting thing that was remarked by the Daily Mail, and that is that Rex Uerman was an architect, and he's working like in New York City even sometimes, and he really did not put a lot of effort into maintaining his house. He lived in a small house on Long Island that was falling apart, and they're like, well, this guy seemed like he was earning quite a lot of money, but he didn't really take care of his house at all, or even get a bigger house for his family. What's the deal with that? And I'm just sitting back there as somebody in the audience watching, this TV show, watching the Daily Mail present this, and I'm thinking, well, yes, because he spends all his money on high-end escorts, obviously, and we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. And there are reports, and again, I think this one was on Nancy Grace even when they're talking about how people who worked as escorts came forward and say that yes, they were at Rex Uerman's house. He didn't try to murder them or anything, but one of them actually talked about recalling very specifically an incident from 1996 when she saw Rex Uerman with Karen Vergata. Now that's been, oh goodness, almost 30 years, but she claimed after the revelations that Karen Vergata, the Fire Island Jane Doe, was identified. She's like, I remember that woman. I worked with her, and this is the last time I saw her. It was at Rex Uerman's house. It really depends on who you believe at that point.
and his house was investigated by the police, or they found another
Absolutely.
house. No, there is.
Oh, his house was investigated by the
Yeah, yeah,
police.
yeah.
They
But
tore it apart pretty much.
yeah, they don't have find anything strange or in his
Oh,
house.
they found loads of strange stuff.
Yeah,
Like, because they went through the computers, and that's how they found these serial
yeah, yeah.
killer checklists. That's
When
how they found all of this incriminating evidence, because he would write down all of these notes, and he was such a big note taker. And again, I really don't think anything falls on John Douglas because I don't know exactly what would be the important things from John Douglas's book, The Cases That Haunt Us, that would that he would use to commit crimes, because that book is not about how to commit murder and get away with it. That's
no,
mostly just about how certain types of criminals are behaving and thinking. It just sort of like, well, this is my process of looking at Jack the Ripper. I think Jack the Ripper would have had a personality like this. That's not telling you how to commit murders. And
true.
it's really, I think the computers were the very damning pieces of evidence. But a lot of the photos that you see where the house is just like an absolute mess is the result of the police and law enforcement cutting apart walls and so on. And they more or less destroyed the house. But I think everybody at this point was like, well, they kind of had to. They're looking for evidence that would incriminate this serial killer suspect that was uh, very likely involved.
But they never found blood trace or DNA, anything who could relate this guy to the crime.
Absolutely, they found DNA evidence. Yes, they
Yeah,
have a DNA match from Rex Uerman to the 1993 murder of Sandra Castillo. Now, I'm not exactly sure where the DNA is, like if it was on
Yeah.
which part of her body or so on, or what type of DNA it is. But Sandra Castillo has been linked by DNA. Jessica Taylor, the victim from 2003, has been linked by DNA. And again, those are the victims from the 90s and the early 2000s, prior to the 4-year halt in Long Island serial killer activity. And this really shows us that there is one single perpetrator.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, the first 3 crimes that he was charged with were the Gilgo Four. Then he is charged with the fourth member of the Gilgo Four. So those 4 crimes, they have a single perpetrator who has been linked. Now, this same person has been linked to the earlier crimes. And if you want to go through all of the process of examining the earlier crimes, we can, and or you want to go through some of these comments in the chat.
Ah, yeah, absolutely. Just thinking if they find the place where he was dismember this woman.
I mean, he definitely left in his notes that he had a specific place in mind, and he definitely like wrote down certain things about the location where he was going to commit these incidents. And I don't have all of his notations memorized, unfortunately, but
No,
yes, he did have that planned.
Tina Fogalia,
Yes. Tina
one of the
Folia
victims.
was murdered in 1982. And, I think I'm just uncertain about that. Rex Heuermann would have been extremely young at the time. If he's 59 in 2023, then Tina Folia was murdered in the early 80s. But if you go on websites like the Gilgo Case website, you'll see that Tina Folia is listed as the first possible victim. And Megan, if I recall, they do have the DNA of Tina Folia's assailant and murderer. The DNA in that case was not found on her body specifically, but it was on a bag that was nearby. So that's something that maybe they can not necessarily rule out Rex Heuermann, but they have his DNA very clearly. And Jerome, this is another instance of they had a suspect. They were
Yeah,
zoning in on a suspect. So they're following him around as he's driving. And what he actually did was he was eating pizza and he threw the pizza box in the trash. And, it had the pizza crust on it. And because there was still food there, they obtained his DNA from that. This happens time and time again. When people discard something, it is no longer their property. Therefore, the police can do anything with it. We saw something very similar with the Idaho murders and Brian Koberger, and they actually went through a piece of garbage that belonged to his father and obtained the familial DNA match and then traced it back to him. The Long Island serial killer, something very similar. Oh, and we have a comment here from Cheryl Bish who says, Megan, oh, talking to Megan, yes. Megan, you can be the star of the show. I have always wondered if Tina Folia's diamond ring was given to his first wife as an engagement ring. That was right before his first marriage. Could be. It could be. Let's see. If he's 59 in 2023, that means he's 60 this year. So, yeah, we're going back to 1983, and he would have been 25, 24, 23 years old. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Mathematically, that works out.
yeah,
BTK gave some jewelry to his daughter. Yeah, serial killers do stuff like that. They just play these types of twisted mind games where this is all about the power process, people.
yeah,
They know that they're giving their trophies from crime scenes to their family members as gifts. This is all just about how I know what I did. I murdered someone, and I'm giving you something from a murder crime scene, and I will know the truth, and no one will. You're going to wear around this artifact from a crime scene that belonged to a murder victim, and nobody will know but me. This is part of the power process.
yeah. And I think that this kind of person enter in your uh, triangle triad of ah, how you call that?
Dark
Uh,
triad?
yeah, exactly.
Yes, the dark triad is
The dark triad.
psychopathy, narcissism and Machiavellianism. Yeah, I think so. And based on what he did to these women, if Rex Heuermann is found guilty, I mean, if he was the killer, he has not been convicted of this yet, innocent until proven guilty. But the Long Island serial killer was definitely someone who was very, very psychopathic. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
to dismember these women's bodies purely for gratification. Yeah, Haynes Anthony, an architect who lived in a shamble of a house. And that's what seems really bizarre. And
yeah,
I think perhaps he didn't care where he lived and he was just using his money and resources to fund a particular aspect of his lifestyle.
yeah. It's strange, really strange.
And Cheryl Bish says, where Tina was dumped, you definitely had to be a local to know the dump site. Well, this is something that they believe for a very long time about the Long Island serial killer. And this will come up when we get to that question about the profiling. There are two real possibilities that were explored, and that is number one, the person was a local of Long Island, a very familiar local of Long Island. Number two, the person was a seasonal worker who regularly came in and out, maybe even if he's not living year round, then he was a seasonal worker doing things on boats, perhaps, or maybe working in things like groundskeeping, coming in and out, and he would have had to have extensive familiarity with Tina Foley. If that ties in as well, that would make sense. But with all the crimes, yes, I agree. And we have one from Megan. What about the $1 million documentary the wife is doing? The GoFundMe page. Meanwhile, she proclaims his innocence. Gross. It's quite odd, Megan, about his wife doing all that. And I'm not sure what to make of it. I can tell you what I think, and it's really hard to accuse somebody of something publicly when they haven't been charged with any crimes. So I'll be careful with my words and just say, I think she knows what's going on. And the GoFundMe, actually, as I understand, was set up by the daughter of Keith Jesperson, the Happy Face Killer. And I don't know if there's any importance here, but I mentioned that he was 6 feet 6 inches tall, one of the taller serial killers, and Rex Heuermann was 6'4". I don't know. Maybe she just was waiting for someone with a similar experience. But yes, yes, Keith Jesperson's daughter was saying that um she created the GoFundMe page because her life got turned upside down when she learned that her father was a serial killer. So she wanted to help the Heuermann family, the wife and the children. I think the wife knows a lot more, though. Haynes Anthony says, did Rex use the beach recreationally during the daytime? I'm almost sure yes. Based on some of the stories that people said, as I said, those escorts came forward and they were saying things about being in the house. And one of them was actually even accused of stealing, even though she didn't actually steal something. Like, she was like wrongfully accused and she just thought it was really bizarre. Anyway,
Yeah.
and Megan says, can you talk about what was found on his laptop, the vote? There was definitely something that was found on the laptop that was very incriminating. And Rex Heuermann for made a search for the words Asian twink, which would refer to an Asian homosexual male, maybe even looking at Asian male porn. And one of the victims, an unconfirmed victim, was what he's referred to as Asian male doe. And he was someone who was living the cross-dresser lifestyle, a man who was dressing up as a woman. I'm not sure how he identified. Always careful with my words in this one as well. But the fact that Rex Heuermann is Googling things like Asian twink, that suggests that this very well could be another crime that was connected to the Long Island serial killer.
He was a kind of Norman Bates, this guy.
To a certain extent, yes, yes. Like he definitely had the mother issues. If he's going to be a sexually motivated serial killer that is targeting women, and in terms of how serial killers approach this concept of mutilations and dismemberment, this is about power. This
Yeah.
is about putting people in a situation when they are so defenseless that not only has this person committed murder, but they've also been able to just tear your body apart. And the even bigger, more extreme example of this would be the cannibalistic serial killers.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any evidence that Rex Heuermann did that, but that's what it's about. It's about
yeah,
domination. This is just another form of
yeah.
seeking
Jeffrey
power.
Dahmer, for example. Jeffrey Dahmer was eating his victim, and it was all about power.
He stated that very publicly. With Jeffrey Dahmer, what
Yeah,
he said is that the only reason why he murdered his victims is because he didn't want them to leave him. So he cannibalized his victims as like the ultimate act of power, that I have so much control over you that I can consume your body.
it's crazy.
It
It's
really
crazy.
is. Cheryl says, very near both Rex and her home. The dump site was on the same major road between Rex's home and Maynardville, the other dump site of the known victims. By the way, you guys can share some things in the chat. How do you pronounce that? I was always saying Manorville, but somebody from Long Island wrote into my channel saying that, it's like, hey, Long Island commuter here. We pronounce it Manorville. And I've been saying it that way, though, but I don't hear anyone else saying it that way. And giving a shout out to Carl, who provided me with that information. Manorville is what it looks like to me.
Manaville. Manaville.
Megan says there may be a victim in the Las Vegas area since they had a vacation home there. I think that would also further implicate his wife more. Things aren't looking good for her, Megan.
And she said, to be
To
fair,
be, oh yeah, you can read it, Jerome.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
To be fair, her hair was just found on the victims, but still, it's a bit odd to me. I don't like it. She divorced him just so they wouldn't lose all of their assets. Well, this is something that frequently does happen when women learn that their husbands are serial killers. The divorce proceedings start rather quickly. Hair can be transferred, though, so I'm not sure that that's
Yeah.
enough to convict. Would not the wreck of a house reflect poorly on him among other professional associates? I would think so. I think that would reflect poorly on him. People are very judgmental.
Yeah.
Norman Bates lived in a childhood home, too. So he did. So he did.
But I prefer Norman Bates because it's a fictional persona. So
Alfred Hitchcock was an amazing filmmaker.
yeah, yeah, one of the best one ever, ever. I love all this movie. So yeah, for the question, I think we have Ross here.
Oh,
Hi
Ross
Ross.
is here. Hello, Ross.
Hello.
Yes, but Jerome, Megan has some very good questions here about the psychological profiling and Shannon Gilbert. Do you see
Yeah.
these around the 429 mark?
Uh,
I could read one of them off right now if you want.
it's here.
And actually, sort
No.
of, yes, yes. She has asked that in a couple different ways. What was your profile on who Lisk was before we learned who the Lisk was? And Megan also asked, did your personal profilings for Lisk match Rex? Somewhat. I mean, Megan, I thought that he was a single, by single, I mean individual. A Caucasian male, one killer. And the problem is, though, Megan, I've been so influenced by these people who are just so insistent that serial killers have to be sad, lonely men. And when you look at these other psychological profiles that have been created for the Long Island serial killer, they're like, well, we think he was poor, working a menial job, working a solitary job. And as I said, the things that they incorporated, like maybe he worked on the boats and he's coming in and out. Maybe he was a groundskeeper and he's taking care of the lawns during the springtime and the summertime and coming in and out. And turns out
No,
it's
the
an
guy was architect.
architect.
No.
People who are working jobs with a lot of education and they are working reasonably well respected professions and affluent professions, they can also be serial killers. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
just something that we don't need to incorporate in all of these psychological profiles. Not all serial killers are working class. Let's just say that over and
No,
over again.
no, no. That's true.
But
That's
Megan,
true.
Megan has a very good question about Shannon Gilbert, and that's at the 429 mark. And she says, "Do you think that Shannon was a victim of the Long Island serial killer?" No, I don't, Megan. And Shannon Gilbert, as we said, she's the woman who started all of the searches that led to the discoveries of the graveyard at Gilgo Beach. She calls 911 because she's visiting a client named Joe Brewer. And he may have done something that bothered her particularly. It could even come down. Some people have hypothesized that he made some comment about her appearance that she didn't like, and that caused her to have some type of very, very emotional episode. She calls 911 and she says, "They're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill me." And there's a voice that's on the 911 call that has been identified not as Joe Brewer, the client, but as her driver, whose name was Michael Pack. And he says, "Shut up." But the two people that are on the 911 call in the background are Joe Brewer and Michael Pack. They were in Joe Brewer's house, and he's actually telling her to leave. He doesn't really want anything to do with her. Something has happened that's made her very emotionally devastated. And what Shannon's actually saying on the 911 call, and I have the whole thing played on my channel, Black Box Online Radio, there's an individual episode for that, is that she thinks that there's some type of outside threat. Somebody is outside that is trying to kill her. Because what she's telling Joe Brewer is, "I want to stay with you." And he's saying, "I'm going to keep the door open. I want to go upstairs. And by the time I come down, I want you to be gone." And she's saying, "No, close the door. I want to stay in his house." Ultimately, I do not think that Joe Brewer was the Long Island serial killer. I don't think he was a suspect in Shannon's death. I don't think he wanted anything to do with her because he's trying to stay away from her, and he's not posing the threat. She wasn't even afraid of him. Now, Michael Pack, the driver, is also trying to get Shannon to come back into his vehicle. He was reportedly driving a black Suburban or a similar vehicle at the time, and he's just trying to trail her up and down on the Oak Beach community, excuse me. Now, somebody else also called 911, and they said that there's a 14-year-old girl running around, and some guys following her in a black Suburban. The black Suburban vehicle was Michael Pack, and yes, Shannon was in her 20s at the time, but this elderly man saw her at night, thought she was about 14 years old. So Michael Pack is unable to get Shannon into the vehicle, and ultimately she wanders into the marshlands. A big reason why Shannon may not be a victim of the Long Island serial killer is that she is the only person to have been found on the opposite side of the Ocean Parkway in the marshes. Everybody else is on the beach.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debate about what happened to Shannon. Jerome read this off in the introduction that Shannon Gilbert may not have been murdered at all. The authorities are stating that she died possibly from the elements, dehydration, or maybe just what they call exposure. And you also said it's possible that she drowned. That's been disputed by a lot of Long Island theorists. Okay, Megan says that the 911 call was a bit odd from Shannon, in my opinion. It's very odd because she's saying that there's this threat that is trying to attack her, and we don't necessarily know who that is. But Michael Pack, the driver, and Joe Brewer, the client, both gave depositions to the authorities, and you can read this stuff all online, and I've done direct responses to them on Black Box Online Radio. And what Michael Pack shares in his deposition is that Shannon Gilbert, was somebody he drove around. That was his job. He's the driver. He said that she had bipolar disorder and she didn't regularly take her medication, or at the very least, she was off her medication. And the way she would deal with her bipolar disorder is that she would self medicate with marijuana and other drugs like ecstasy. So is it possible that Shannon just had some type of manic episode and then started running around thinking that there's this threat? She developed a little bit of paranoia. She enters the marsh, and for the longest time, I accepted that. I accepted that she had just died from the elements. Now, the people who dispute that are the family members of Shannon Gilbert, and her attorney was just on Court TV yesterday. Her family's attorney, that is,
Yeah.
and he was saying that they believe Shannon was murdered. They've said this for a very long time, and they have reasons for that. The authorities conducted an autopsy of Shannon Gilbert, and they said that it's an accidental death. She died because of exposure or drowning or dehydration, something to that effect. Whereas Shannon's family had their own independent medical examiner conduct an investigation, and he determined that she was murdered because he said that the hyoid bone was broken in her neck, meaning that she was strangled. Most likely, yeah, strangled. That's the bone that is broken during strangulation. This happens very frequently in lots of true crime cases where we have conflicting evidence in the stories and we aren't necessarily sure who to believe. Like the authorities will say one thing, then the family says, well, they're just trying to close the case, so they're not properly investigating the findings. Another example of this would be the murder of Laura Jean Dugan from North Dakota, and I have an episode about her on Black Box Online Radio, and I also have an episode about the death of Daniel Huffman. It's called Gift of Love, the death of Daniel Huffman. The family also disputes that. Somebody even wrote into the comment section saying, hey, I'm a family member. I dispute these findings because of these reasons. You can find all of that on BBOR. And, I don't know who to believe. And I mentioned Dr. Scott Bond. He stated that he thought Shannon was murdered. For the longest time, I really thought that it was just an accidental death, a tragedy in just a very similar location. Somebody brought it to my attention that Shannon disappeared in the spring of 2010, and in Long Island in the spring, it's not going to be extremely cold outside. If she were to be in a marsh and 70 degrees outside, she wouldn't freeze to death. No, but maybe spending 3 days there, she could die
Yeah.
from dehydration. That would be something that would be possible. I mean, I just think that there is insufficient evidence to say that she was murdered, though. And Megan says, that's how I feel about this Zodiac case, in terms of at least how passionate some people are in their opinions. You'll never be able to discuss with someone who is so certain. No, Megan, you won't.
No.
I agree.
Yeah.
Fire Pixie says the sister also had mental problems and ended up stabbing her mother to death. Yes, Shannon Gilbert's sister had schizophrenia, and her
Oh,
mother's name was Mari Gilbert. Mari Gilbert is featured in the movie Lost Girls, and I have a direct response to that on Black Box Online Radio as well. Lots of content on BBOR. I invite you to like and
a lot.
subscribe over there. And Mari Gilbert was ultimately murdered by her daughter, as Fire Pixie says. Now, about this, Jerome. In 2021, I just started exploring the Long Island serial killer topic as a request. People make lots of requests for Black Box Online Radio. And it took 3 days, 3 episodes to just explore the story of Shannon Gilbert, about what happened to her. And I was just like, just completely thrown off because, all right, I'm exploring the Long Island serial killer. I'm starting this new exploration into a true crime case that is going to go on for a while.
Yeah.
And after 3 days of looking at the beginning, Shannon Gilbert's story, I was back to square one. I was just like, I don't think Shannon was murdered by the Long Island serial killer. Now I have nothing. And yes, I mean, of course, I did some things like watch the movie Lost Girls and respond to that. Yeah, you can watch that stuff and gather some things. It's great when they make educational movies. Like, that's really what Lost Girls is. It's sharing something in an educational way. Rest in peace to Shannon Gilbert, rest in peace to Mari Gilbert. But at the same time, my understanding of the case was zero after the first 3 episodes, and I don't normally experience that in the true crime world. Like, you do 3 episodes on the Zodiac, you might learn something. 3 episodes on Jack the Ripper, you might
Yeah.
learn something. With the Long Island serial killer, that didn't happen.
Yeah, but this guy Rex Herman is yeah, he's looking up. He's in jail for now.
Yes.
Yes, great, because with this kind of people in the nature, it could be really dangerous.
Yes, there were a couple comments in the chat about burner phones. We also had one from
Yeah.
Haynes Anthony. Burner phone traveling with his personal phone, with how Rex was studying and learning. Oh, where did that one go? Studying and learning. More killers will learn from that. Israel Keys did a lot of studying and learning too. Scary. So, The burner phones was how Rex communicated with the escorts, and he was very particular to use those, particularly in the case of Amberlynn Costello, the final victim, because as I understand, he is actually almost spotted. Like his car is like just right around the corner, and she's communicating with them. And it appears that she knew who this guy was. She had maybe even seen him before, and he was communicating with her on a burner phone. That's why they were unable to track her down and identify the killer.
That's horrible. Really, there is monster out there. A question for me. Lost Girls. Do you have the translation in French for the movie? Because
Les
sometimes,
filles perdues.
yeah, yeah, la fille perdue. Mais I'm going to check. I'm going to check.
Lost Girls, though, I saw it on Netflix back in 2021, and it's based on a book. And oh, what's the guy's name? Colker? Sorry about that, but yeah, it's
No,
based
don't
on.
be sorry. No, no, no. There is no program.
How could the wife not know that there was a torture chamber in the basement? I think it would have been the garage. Or, I mean, I don't exactly know where the torture chamber would have been, but Haynes Anthony, a lot of the time, it appears that the wife knows more than she leads on. Even if she's not an active participant, she can be turning a blind eye to something. And I think she knows what's going on. That's a suspicion, and I hope people understand that. I can't bring that to the FBI or the investigators or to any of these police departments in New York. It's just a suspicion.
And the movie Lost Girl, that's something to do with the Long Island serial killer? Oh, it
Oh,
was
yes,
just
yes,
yeah,
yes. Lost Girls is directly about the Long Island serial killer and the investigations. It begins with the family of Shannon Gilbert just kind of waiting for her to come home for dinner one night. And it's really telling the story of Mari Gilbert, Shannon Gilbert's mother, and her investigations trying to find out what happened to her daughter because her daughter was a missing person. And she starts connecting with these other women. And so, long story short,
yeah.
the authorities are looking for Shannon and they discover all of these human remains on Gilgo Beach. So then they identify the remains, and then Mari Gilbert connects with them, and then she receives this news that Shannon Gilbert's death was not connected to the other victims. And they're just like, how is this possible? I mean, it's
Yeah.
the search for Shannon that triggered all of this. And people brought this to my attention as well back when I did my Long Island serial killer series, when they're just like, well, come on, Ned, you don't think Shannon Gilbert's death was related? Look at the proximity. The only thing is that her body's on the other side of the Ocean Parkway, and I I have to admit that that is something that does make me think about it, and the fact that she may have been murdered if the independent autopsy was correct, but conflicting information is what I'm dealing with right now. But let's also focus in on that for a second. You have this type of story though that's really a really interesting take for a movie because it's not about the killer. That was one of the things that really surprised me about Lost Girls is that it focuses almost exclusively on the feelings that the victims and their families, particularly, let me rephrase, it focuses exclusively on the feelings that the victims' families would have had. Because we didn't know who the killer was at the time. I'm sure there'll be a Long Island serial killer movie at some point, and a Lifetime version as well
Yeah.
that won't be as good.
Tell Jerome about how the bodies were initially found.
Well, we went through some of that right now. Okay, though, Megan, how they were initially found. This is what I said on Black Box Online Radio years ago. Someone once told me that the Roman senator Cato used to always insert something into one of his speeches, and that was defeat the Carthaginian civilization. And I brought that into Black Box Online Radio, and I said, In every okay, if in every speech he says that, in every episode about the Long Island serial killer, I'm going to say this. Yes, there was a big discovery in December of 2010 where they found a bunch of remains, where they found the serial killer graveyard. And 4 years before that, this is what I always say, 4 years, the authorities knew that a serial killer was operating. They just didn't know to what extent. They didn't know how these cases were convicted. So they called him the Manorville Butcher. And the Manorville Butcher might have actually included other crimes that were completely unrelated. If you read some of the claims, but as I said, multiple victims were even referred to as the Manorville victims. Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack. But how are these remains discovered? People are walking and they happen upon them. Most notably, with the case of Karen Vergata, a Fire Island Jane Doe. She's walking. By she, I mean a man and a woman are walking on the beach and they find two severed legs of a woman. And ultimately, she would be linked to a skull that would be found years later. And then that's how they were able to draw a composite sketch of Karen Vergata, which is reasonably accurate, not perfect, but reasonably.
If you want, you we can maybe watch the trailer of the movie.
Yeah, sure.
Like this, I'm going to see if I have already seen this movie or not. I have no idea.
This is my daughter, Shannon Maria Gilbert. There's one here for every day that she's missing.
What was she doing in a gated community, 100 miles away from home in the middle of the night?
My daughter didn't run away. She's missing. Her last contact with anyone was to 911. What happened?
I'm just a driver. I wait in my car, and that's all I do.
Honestly, who spends this much time looking for a missing hooker? While searching for a missing girl, one of our officers located 4 bodies.
What's over there? Tell me right now, damn it! What did you find?
It's not your daughter, Mrs. Gilbert, which is why it's important that you don't talk to the media.
Not even looking for her? All the other girls' families invited us to a vigil.
No one's talking about our girls. And when they do, it's prostitute, hooker, never mother, daughter. And it's our job to make sure these girls are not forgotten. I have been dismissed and ignored, but one thing I won't be is silenced. It's time for accountability.
So on the news, at least they're finally paying attention.
Is this Mary Gilbert? I have some information you're going to want to hear.
What is this, some kind of cover-up?
You think it's your responsibility to bring her home. But this isn't on you.
I'm her mother. It's all on me.
Beautiful dreamer, awaken to me.
Ah, yes, and Jerome, thank you for playing that. And as we saw at the end, the book is written by Robert Kolker. That was his name.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, but not in Belgium, because I love Gabriel Burns, and I have watched all of this movie, and no, I have never seen this movie, but I can maybe find it on Amazon, or I don't know, but it's a movie that I'm going to watch because I really like this actor, and in the same time, so I want to know more about this case. And even if it's just a movie, it could be a good movie.
Okay, though, Jerome, I will respond to Cheryl's question, but I will just give you the preface for Lost Girls, and that is that trailer made it look extremely exciting and exhilarating. It is a slow-moving movie that is all about just the emotions that the people experience. It is definitely not this type of fast-paced crime drama.
No.
There's definitely not a lot of action in the movie. I mean, it's very good because I was watching it to learn about the Long Island serial killer story, and as I said, it's almost like a movie that was made in an educational way, but it will be slow moving.
which is nice. I like
Yes.
this kind of movie. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Okay, but
the-
Cheryl says, Ned, what is your opinion of the political issues going on in Suffolk County and the issues with Police Chief James Burke? Would it have been solved sooner if it wasn't for those issues? Well, James Burke went on to become a Long Island serial killer suspect himself. He was involved with multiple sex related crimes, and he's the subject of the book Jimmy the King about these things. Ultimately, would it have been solved sooner if not for his own misdeeds? Perhaps. But Jerome just played something from the trailer of Lost Girls. And did you all hear that? Everybody in the chat? When one guy says, why spend so long looking for a missing hooker? Something like that. This comes up time and time again in countless true crime
yeah,
cases
that's true.
where they
Yeah.
say that law enforcement does not care about people who are sex workers or escorts. I mean, maybe even going back to the Jack the Ripper stories, but I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that. That's why I'm trying to cite a specific example. It's happened so frequently when they say that this is one of the reasons why serial killers go after these women. Number one, they can get them in a vulnerable place. Number two, they can get them in. They know that they can target these women because the police won't care. They won't do a proper investigation, and they're going to turn a blind eye. And that's saddening. Now, does that
Yeah.
stuff directly affect James Burke? Perhaps not, but James Burke was the man who was just involved with countless scandals, and he was even even after he was removed as police chief, he was arrested again for soliciting. Oh, and that's one for you actually, Jerome, from Megan. Megan says, can't wait to see you delve into the list case more. And Lost Girls is a good movie. See, Megan knows what I'm talking about. It's slow but good. Yes, because it's that trailer made it look like an action movie or something like that. But
No, it's
definitely
not.
not.
No,
You know,
no.
Jerome, I'm going to be very honest with you. I first learned about the Long Island serial killer case in 2012. And I told you guys, I've been a true crime follower for 30 years. I watched a lot of 48 Hours, and, I almost think of Erin Moriarty as one of my friends. And when they released the episodes on the Long Island serial killer, I tried to watch it, but I couldn't comprehend the narrative because there were so many different elements. Number one, the Gilgo Four. Number two, the serial killer graveyard. Number three, there are these previous Manorville crimes that are connected, even though the remains are widely discarded. This is one of the reasons why people thought that there were multiple killers. They're just like, it seems to us that somebody has gone out of his way to separate the remains, yet some of them seem so close together it almost made no sense. Turns out it's most likely one killer.
Yeah, and it could happen that a body could cover another body, an older body, and it's something that could happen. Yeah, I'm checking in the chat if there is another question, but
Yeah, I think we had some from the beginning. And we have something new here. Oh, we have
I'm
this
the,
one from Megan. I'm actually working a case in Indiana. Her name is Andy Wagner. They initially classified her in the news as homeless, on drugs. Huh? She had a home and just OMG. Megan, was this individual Andy Wagner, was she working as a sex worker? And did the media just kind of jump to conclusions? Now, Jerome probably knows this as well, that even though people are reporters and they're trying to share the news, they make all types of mistakes, especially
yeah,
during the early news coverage. And I remember a quotation from Cloyd Steiger, who was one of the panelists on the Citizen Detective podcast, because he was a former member of law enforcement, former homicide detective, and he read an article about a case that he was investigating in the newspaper. And everything was wrong. He's like, every detail was wrong. They didn't get a single thing right. Might as well have been a different story. the reporters are hit or miss. Sometimes, though, some of them get it right. Sometimes you'll read an article where everything is spot on. Like we can
Yeah.
look back at this. I'm talking about like things from the Zodiac killer case and even the unconfirmed crimes, like when I did my series on the disappearance of Donna Lass. Some people get it right, let's be clear.
Oh yeah, there is good reporter and bad reporter. Yeah, it's true. But I think I have a problem with the chat because I don't have I don't have everything.
Oh, the
So
chat's not coming in on your end?
if you see question, go ahead because I don't know what happened with the chat.
We have one comment, though, here from Megan, who says, I think the Cherry's Jane Doe is connected as well. Yes, Megan, there are so many reasons to suspect that. And I don't know what you think, Megan, but part of me wonders, though, about this connection between Peach's Jane Doe, who has a peach tattoo, Cherry's Jane Doe, who has a cherries tattoo. You have two women who are dismembered and found in similar parts of the country, state, area, region, even though it's 10 years apart. It's so similar. They also had either the same ethnicity or a similar ethnicity. It's possible that Peach's Jane Doe was a light-skinned female and light-skinned Latina female, and Cherry's Jane Doe was African American, but similar in appearance. And there are just so many things that sound similar to Cherry's story compared to the other victims. I mean, let alone that how many serial killers in New York do you have dismembering the bodies of victims? The difference with Cherry's Jane Doe is her torso was put into a suitcase, and the other victims had their remains spread around. But we don't even know if all of the victims were mutilated and the exact specifications of their mutilations. One thing, though, that I do recall that just came to mind right now is that in these notes that Rex Heuermann is leaving behind, one thing that he stated was decapitate the victims. That's part of his serial killer checklist. But Cherry's Jane Doe is in line with that. Absolutely. Megan also says, yeah, but with that map. Oh, we have one here from Megan. No, not a sex worker, but just jumped to conclusions. Still missing. So sad. No clue why they said this. If it was clear that she had a home, her mom ended up because her heart is so broken over this. Oh, her mom ended up blank. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but what it sounds like is they just kind of jumped to conclusions, started making assumptions, and was there a particular reason you think why they would make those comments about her, Megan? Why you think they would say that she was homeless and on drugs? And you can be as blunt and honest as you want. But there's another one here. Oh, Haynes Anthony says, predators hunt for the most vulnerable. Didn't Rex seek out petite women? Yes, absolutely. Women who are about 5 feet tall, 4'11", 5'1", 5'2". I think the tallest was Maureen Brainerd Barnes. This is something that was factored into the psychological profiles, and I'm so glad you brought this up, Haynes Anthony, because they were just saying, this killer seems like he has a very specific choice when it's coming to the women. He's specifically looking for women who are small in stature. And it's quite shocking when you see somebody like Rex Heuermann, who's 6'4", and also he's very large and fat. As I said, they say he's the biggest person in the courtroom most of the time. Is it just about like dominating women? It's what Haynes Anthony says right here, hunting for the most vulnerable women. And you see how he says predators hunt. Now, in Rex Heuermann's notes as well, he also specifically referred to these activities as hunting and disposal. Hunting, disposal, recon, that's the type of information that's used.
And the victim at the same age, approximately?
Relatively, yes. We don't know the ages of all of the victims because there is actually a very large age range. And one thing, though, that we have not brought up yet is, and excuse me for misstating this, Jerome, is in 1997, we had the murder of Peach's Jane Doe. She also had a daughter who was with her at the time, and she was only, I want to say, 3 years old, but she's referred to as Baby Doe. And Baby Doe was murdered and placed most closely to the body of Valerie Mack. And for the longest time, they thought that Valerie Mack was the mother of Baby Doe, but Valerie Mack was simply referred to as Jane Doe number 6 at the time. But, like, they've done their forensic examinations and testing, and it turns out she belonged to Peaches. So this is one of the reasons why they were even wondering about multiple killers, because someone has made an effort to spread the remains, but they just move them closer to other victims. Granted, 3 years had gone by between the murder of Peaches Jane Doe and the murder of Baby Doe and the murder of Valerie Mack. So maybe he just forgot. As was proposed by Dr. Scott Bond, this guy might be very forgetful. That's why he has to write everything down. And we have one here from Megan who says, for Andy, I think it was just because the family was honest and that she had been struggling with drugs. Oh, so she actually was using drugs, but she was not homeless. Oh, okay. So then, yeah, the media is going to jump to conclusions like that. If they just hear that somebody's doing drugs, that means she must be on the streets, right? I don't know why, but they would. But I do appreciate Sharon in the chat saying, please check out Ned's YouTube channel. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sharon. Yes, as you see right there, Black Box Online Radio, talking about all types of true crime cases: Jack the Ripper, the Zodiac Killer, D.B. Cooper, the Phantom Killer, the New Orleans Axeman, and the Long Island Serial Killer, just to name a few. But, I have almost 2,000 episodes of Black Box Online Radio. I'm sure there will be something over there that you're curious about.
It's huge. It's huge. And you can find...
7 years, Jerome.
Yeah, I know, but you have made so much work. And you can find Ned on Spotify, on Instagram, on Facebook, his personal Facebook page.
Yes, Ned Dehan on Facebook. And also, I should point out one of the reasons why there's so many episodes of Black Box Online Radio is in 2020, I started writing a series of fiction called The White Horse Killer Saga, and I released the audiobooks on YouTube. They're actually YouTube exclusives now in audiobook format, and I'm on the 4th one right now called The Eyes of the White Horse, and I just put out a new episode yesterday on Black Box Online Radio, and I think that's the best one yet. I know I'm the person who makes up this stuff, so I'm always like in the moment with it. But yes, I have put out 4 stories in the White Horse Killer Saga, 4 books, if you will. And The Eyes of the White Horse just released the 2nd part. I mean, if you guys want to check that out, if you need somebody to pass you the time on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I invite you to check out the audiobooks for the White Horse Killer Saga on Black Box Online Radio.
Which is fictional, but it's really, really nice written. And you have some talent, Ned. Really.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerome. I appreciate that.
It's true. Send you my spreadsheet on Discord. Oh.
Yes, Megan says, Jerome, I will send you my spreadsheet on Discord and I'll start some work on it. Feel free to use it whenever. Should help you on this new case. You mean on the Long Island serial killer case? Yes, absolutely. And there was a website called gilgocase.com that was very beneficial for looking at things like the timelines. It has not been updated recently with some of the new developments following the news, but there's also the Catch List page on Facebook and Instagram. Catch List is primarily active on Instagram, but on Facebook, you can find pages such as Remembering Jessica Taylor, and I think they made a new page for Remembering Sandra Castilla. I remember when the news broke that they had arrested Rex Heuermann, and these are the people that I was connecting with, because I follow their pages. They know about Black Box Online Radio, interact with them in the comments section sometimes, and especially the Remembering Jessica Taylor page. I wrote to the person who owns that one, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this news? And they're just like, we don't know. We don't know really what this means. With the person who runs the Catch List page, Catch Long Island Serial Killer, I was like, hey, what do you think about this news? We don't know. We don't know what this means. Because what happened was, we only had a partial announcement. You have all of these victims in the Long Island serial killer case. And they said, oh, yeah, well, we found a suspect for 3 of them. And as I said at the beginning, the media was only referring to this person as the Gilgo Beach killer. And we're just like, well, what about all the other victims, that happened from 1996 to 2003? Now it's 93 to 2003. What about all of this?
Yeah.
And I think that that's forever going to dampen the story. I think that people are just not going to be able to comprehend this narrative. There's not just this explosion of, oh, yeah, we caught the guy. When it's going to come out in these very gradual increments, yeah, the hardcore true crime followers are going to remember it all.
Yeah.
But not everybody, not to the level of the
No.
Golden State Killer.
No. And Sharon say, and Terry Hobbs, the West Memphis 3.
Oh, Terry Hobbs is from the West Memphis 3. I'm not familiar with that case.
Oh, it's a shame with Damien Eccles. Sharon helped me with the name of the 2 other guy who were. No, they were not implicated in the crime, but they were accused of killing a 3 young boy, and they were really young, and they were accused to kill this little boy, but it was not them, and it was proven 20 years after. But yeah, it's a long story. Ned is yeah, I do agree.
Well, I saw that one in the chat, Haynes Anthony. Firstly, thank you so much for that. But then Sharon was posting about Terry Hobbs, and I'm like, yes, I read that. Ned is an encyclopedia. Then I see a name in the chat that I do not recognize, Terry Hobbs. And you said, Jerome, that's from the West Memphis 3?
Yeah.
Okay, as you guys see, I've followed some true crime cases, but not all. And
No.
I mean, I really try to keep up to date with the news about the Long Island serial killer. Jerome knows about the Zodiac. Now I'm in the world of D.B. Cooper, and that's a big one. There's a lot of there are a lot of people to learn in the D.B. Cooper case, and with the D.B. Cooper case, quite different. We only have one incident as opposed to something like the Long Island serial killer mystery, when you have multiple crimes that have occurred over multiple decades. But I like this comment here from. Oh, well, actually, we'll do this one here. Megan says, hence drugs equals on the street equals not missing, just high. Megan, I saw a very good video about this on the Lorden Arts channel, which is run by John Lorden. He hosts several different programs such as Brain Scratch Searchlight, Case Cracked, and Crime After Crime. And for a very long time, I was a regular follower of that one. And I think that he really was a big influence on me as a true crime creator.
Yeah.
And he always would approach these stories with a sense of integrity. And he shared something in one video, and that was that in America, 1 out of every 9 people has done illegal drugs. So if you know more than 9 people, you most likely know someone who has done illegal drugs. So when the media starts putting people down for using illegal drugs, when people in the comments section start putting people down for using illegal drugs, when law enforcement puts people down for using illegal drugs, then what are they going at? I mean, these are your friends, your family members, your classmates. These are the people that you know personally.
Yeah.
So why does anybody's life have less value just because they've done illegal drugs? And I know you're fully aware of this, Megan, but he just brought that up so clearly. And I think that that's important to remember. Even if someone is using drugs, they don't deserve to be murdered. And I dealt with this in the Long Island serial killer case because I really got into it with someone whom I had to ban from my channel. It was after I did the episode on the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. And I have individual episodes on all of these victims, mind you. And I did that one. And someone wrote into the comment section just saying, why are you talking about this story? Better people have been murdered. Your audience must just have some morbid curiosity, fascination. And that's just a disgusting thing to say. And that's when I decided that on Black Box Online Radio, I just ban people if they start insulting murder victims.
Yeah,
just because someone was working as an escort Does that mean that their life is
No,
less valuable than somebody else's? Why would you
no,
say that? I just don't want that type of stuff on my channel.
no. I really understand. It's a lack of respect. Really, it's a
And also a lack of humanity. You're just
and lack
like
of humanity.
dehumanizing somebody.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Ned, where were you in 1969? I was waiting to be born, Megan. I wish I had been there in 1969. And, I have some frustrating moments about that year because I think Jerome might experience this too. 1969 was the peak of Zodiac killer activity. For me, it goes all the way back to 66, 63, 62, all of those things. I wish I actually knew the truth about the Zodiac crimes, like just to be there, present. Of course, yeah, if you're present, stop the killer or something, but just to actually know the truth. But 1969, Megan, one thing that I've contemplated doing is just a very large, kind of a reshaping of my show, or maybe even creating a new podcast on the 1960s, or maybe we have enough material just to do one on 1969 with all of these terrible things that are happening on planet Earth. Got the Zodiac, the Manson family, and
Yeah,
countless other serial killer stories. I brought up Kenneth Harrison, the Boston Giggler, for example, another serial killer operating in 1969. I mean, I've really been tempted to do that, just kind of like maybe just the 1969 podcast. And there's also an episode on Black Box Online Radio called The 1960s One Giant Conspiracy. But, we have the moon landing and
yeah,
just a very, very pivotal time in the United States.
yeah. We have Woodstock in 1969.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, music was a little bit better back in the 60s and
Oh yeah,
70s. No offense to any of these electronic creators of today.
yeah,
1969 is the start of postmodernism. Megan says 100% the cops didn't treat it as a missing persons case. Seriously, and due to this, and like I said, the mom took it so hard she committed. Oh, you mean she ended herself? My heart breaks so badly for her family. You mean she committed suicide?
yeah,
That's what you meant when you blanked something out. Wow. I am so sorry about that.
yeah. Me too.
And the next one, so much evidence will never be able to be recouped due to it not being treated seriously. Video camera footage, age. But Megan, that's not an isolated incident. We see that very, very frequently when just it appears that the authorities aren't investigating the cases, or they might do things where they are putting in a little bit of effort, but it's a piss poor effort. And another clear example of this is the Freeway Phantom story from the early 1970s. And that's another unidentified serial killer case. The Freeway Phantom operated in 71, 72 in the Washington, D.C. area. And they believe that that killer got away simply because the authorities weren't doing a proper investigation. Haynes Anthony has a good one here, Jerome. Got to bring this one up. After Woodstock came Altamont. Now that is when we saw the downfall of the 1960s, right? That is when they, had the Rolling Stones concert and they were using the Hells Angels as security,
Yeah,
and it just turned into an absolute disaster. I was watching a presentation on Altamont when I was a teenager, Haynes Anthony, and that was the first time that I heard the phrase, the English language expression, no good deed goes unpunished, because the Altamont concert was supposed to be free, right? Like they just
yeah.
wanted, like, they didn't charge money for it. And they said they put on a free concert and that's what happened. No good deed goes unpunished.
I'm
Megan
totally
says,
right.
times were different, harder to get away with that now. The people that do that too scare me a good deal. Well, Megan, we have a lot of things going on now where we have, as you said, times are different in the 70s and
Yeah,
60s, you mean? In the new millennium, we have social media. We have smartphones. We can make our own camera phone videos. And these things are very important because Even when we go back to the Long Island serial killer case in 2007, 8, 9, 10, not everybody had a smartphone. Not everybody was sharing things on social media in the same way. You don't just create a Facebook page for Jessica Taylor or Sandra Castilla. I mean, you don't just create a Long Island serial killer page. And even if somebody did, people wouldn't understand it and they wouldn't be able to operate it. Social media has changed so much in the last 15 years that
Yeah.
we can do things like share information because people actually care about these stories. And we've known this for years as true crime followers. There's a reason why people watch Court TV. There's a reason why people watch HLN. There's a reason why people are just scouring the internet for true crime information because people are curious about it. And certain stories go beyond the true crime threshold walls. And, there's some very widely publicized cases. You guys know what they are. But with the Long Island serial killer case, I think a big reason why it isn't as popular as some of these other stories is people didn't understand it. I told you, I watched like 2 documentaries on it, and I was like, what? I have no idea
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
All I could ascertain and, remember was that they found a serial killer graveyard. I knew nothing else about the specifics. It's a complicated mystery. Drinkwater says, different but the same. Active serial killer in Pittsburgh, but I think he moved to Austin. Oh, Drinkwater. What is the name of this? It's the Rainy Day Ripper. Is that the name of the one? Is that it? Where there's the series of homicides in Austin and Rainy Day Ripper, Rainy Street Ripper, and they think that they are all connected. Is that what you're talking about? I did a short episode about this once on Black Box Online Radio, but that was a very long time ago. I think there's like a series of dead bodies that showed up in Austin, Texas, and some people think they are connected and other people think they are not. Yeah, we have a good comment here from Megan. Maybe families need better resources than we have now. That wouldn't be a bad nonprofit. It'd be a great nonprofit, Megan. Again, to cite an idea from John Lorden from the Lord and Arts channel, he said, though, somebody should have the specific job of being the liaison from the police to the families. Like, this should be their sole occupation, where they share information to the families of the victims. And I don't even know what we would call that. Someone like a communications assistant, family relations representative who is sharing the investigations materials. And yeah, they can't reveal classified or privileged information, but they can keep the families updated. That would be very helpful because the families can then put that stuff out on social media.
Imagine if we can have access to smartphone or social media in 1969 with the Zodiac stuff, and it would be
We would have
really
been
different.
Oh, no, sweet. I get Jerome. I guarantee you that Lindsay and Rebecca Robbins would be filming the Zodiac with their camera phones after the Stein murder, and we'd have video of the Zodiac. It wouldn't last long, and if we in the day of smartphones. Well, Haynes Anthony says today we live in a police state that blue meanies rule us all. Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, what we're sort of talking about is the way that the Zodiac got away is because things weren't closely monitored. Things weren't, they just had no sightings of this person. And the United States is a lot less monitored in terms of CCTV compared to China and even the United Kingdom. I'm sure Sharon has heard some things about this.
Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of surveillance in your country. It's amazing.
Drinkwater says, yes, he kills around waters and bridges. I think they are the same. Absolutely heartbreaking and frightening to see all of the missing person flyers. Yeah, it's called the Rainy Street Ripper, right? The name of this serial killer that's doing this. If it is indeed one person, there are a couple different serial killer ideas. I say ideas, they're more like theories that people have about how there could be large amounts of homicidal activity that are the work of a serial killer gang, or maybe they're unconnected. The most famous would be the smiley face killers, where people think that there is either a gang or a movement of people who commit murders, primarily of Caucasian males, and they leave the mark of a smiley face nearby, and they are found dead in the water. And
It's like on the in the TV show The Mentalist,
I
the,
didn't watch The
smi-
Mentalist.
the Smile Killer, Smiley Killer. No, with
I I know very little about The Mentalist. You're talking about the one with Simon Baker, and
yes, yes,
yeah, they promoted that heavily in America. I know about the killer named Red John, but
yeah.
I don't know about the smiley face killers on The Mentalist.
No, it's I've already
But
done
also,
this.
there's the Manchester Canals Pusher. That's another example from one from the United Kingdom, done in a similar way. Dead victims found near the water. Cheryl says, "Doesn't the UK have that?" What do you mean exactly, Cheryl? Let's see if she's talking about something in the chat. Oh, there's a good one here from Ben Dallas. You want to get this one, Jerome? Put that on the screen. I do wonder if Rex Heuermann did kill all the victims and Bitroff, possibly being innocent of the two murders he was accused of. For the longest time, the prime suspect in the Long Island serial killer mystery was John Bitroff. And he was a convicted murderer, I guess. Ben Dallas says, he's accused of murder. He's a real life criminal. And people simply thought that he was a serial killer of a larger proportion. And I did a direct response to this once on Black Box Online Radio. You can see John Bitroff in the thumbnail, where I think I've told Jerome this before, that somebody wrote this very well-worded article about how the Long Island serial killer is probably this guy named John Bitroff. It's the prime suspect in the case. It's most likely him. They just don't have the evidence to convict him. And as we're going to see very clearly, that type of thinking doesn't work. That is convenient thinking, but it doesn't always work.
No,
The
no,
DNA is
certainly.
matching somebody else, and it's most likely Rex Heuermann. Now, was John Bitroff innocent of those? If I had to just give you my intuition sense, I would say no, but I'm uninformed on that. I couldn't make that decision right now. Thank you, though, Ben Dallas, though. Very good point.
Really good one. Yeah.
Megan says, yeah, try to convince each state or each department to hire X amount of new people for this role. Wouldn't happen, sadly. Andy's mom would help from a nonprofit who. Oh, Andy's mom had help from a nonprofit that took advantage of her. I mean, I can't comment on the specifics of that. I'm not sure everything that happened, but that is a real shame. Oh, Cheryl says the victim liaison. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And Megan says, Cheryl, I think it's a great idea. I just don't realistically see it happening. Plus, you'd also have to have the police deciding between real and fake victims. Well, that's the whole point, though, Megan. We're trying to say that they're not fake victims, right?
No.
I mean, unless you mean like someone who has been determined to have been a hoaxer or something like that. And that does happen as well. I've talked about that recently on a couple different shows, when just these stories about people that would go to the authorities, maybe about an abuser, or even if they've been assaulted, and the authorities just think that they're making it up. They think that they're lying. When someone, is under the threat of death, and the police just say, you're a liar.
Yeah, but this kind of person who dismember people, it's a lot.
Well, it is, though, with this one. It's like just the disgusting lengths of humanity. And it really seems like this is somebody who most likely grew up with some type of very intense mistreatment in his childhood, or at the very least, growing up with the fear of women, hating women. All I'm seeing is just animosity toward women in the Long Island serial killer.
It's often against his mother, or
Yeah. Somebody was asking about did things match up with your psychological profile? I haven't seen
yeah.
any of these details about Rex Huerman hating women, but I'm pretty sure that he did. I think that we're going to find the evidence that is going to match up with those things. I think it was
And
Megan that asked that question.
this guy has a family.
Rex Huerman? Yes,
Yeah.
he's married with children.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
You're welcome, Sharon. She says, thanks for the big hearts, Ned and Jerome. And Jerome, we are almost approaching the 2-hour mark. Do you have any final things you'd like to say about the Long Island serial killer?
I have learned a lot about this case with you. Thank you very much, Ned. I really appreciate all the details you had shared with me and with the audience. And like you say, it's a horrible case, and in the same time, it's a strange case because we don't know everything, and it's a case who is going on and going on, and maybe in the future we will learn more about other victims. Or
I think so too, and the news is still coming out. And
yeah,
everybody, I'll say it once again, Rex Huerman is innocent until proven guilty, and
yeah,
it seems quite likely. What I shared once on Facebook was when someone was, just posting the headlines, I was like, he's the accused Long Island serial killer. And in the United States of America, we live under the standard of innocent until proven guilty. But somebody also once said that wherever there's smoke, there's fire. And there's a lot of smoke in this case.
yeah, yeah. There is a lot who put the fingers on this guy. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, there really is, because it's to the point where, if his DNA is found at all of these crime scenes,
Yeah,
connecting with the victims, I think he's
yeah,
going to be convicted. And we are also going to learn more about the victims. We might even learn the names of some of these victims. So I hope that that does indeed happen.
no. Didn't Rex give his brother his transporting vehicle?
That I'm not sure of, actually, Ains Anthony. Good question. I'll look into that.
Sharon. Yeah, we are their voice. This is the name of his channel, a channel, and
Yeah,
she
that's
will make
Sharon's channel.
and she will make a comeback really soon with great guests. It will be amazing. Yes, Megan. Yeah.
Megan says, no, I agree. I just think the police would be doing this.
Thank you, Sharon. Share Ned's video. It's I never forget to watch BBOR, and since the beginning, I always said it's my favorite true crime channel, but not also true crime because Ned talks about a lot of things, and I I, I love this channel really, really.
Much
It's
appreciated, Jerome. Drinkwater says, it seems like the spree killers are more common than serial killers. I don't know if that has always been true. Well, Drinkwater, what I've gathered from following different true crime cases on Black Box Online Radio is we see all of it, and I'm not exactly sure about the exact patterns. But, all of this behavior is present. Spree killers who just go on their rampages without returning to normalcy. Serial killers with short reigns of terror. Those are also very frequent. Numerous examples of that. Some of these lovers' lane killers that we've talked about. And then we have the serial killers who have the extended reigns of terror. Look at the activities of the Long Island serial killer, though. 1993 to 2010, 17 years. That's a long reign of terror. normal. That's the sad point.
Yeah.
All right, Jerome. So this thing is winding down. If anybody has any final things, they can put them in the chat. And other than that, I would just like to say thank you for letting me be a guest on the channel Mysteries with Mr. Belgique. And I look forward to being back if you want to do another episode this weekend. Jeff Jones, hey, how's it going? We got
Oh,
Jeff in the
Jeff.
chat. Always good to
Hi,
see
Jeff.
him. And yes,
Great to see you.
we're going to be doing a panel discussion episode very soon, right? About the
Yeah,
Zodiac
on
Killer.
Monday. Yeah, on Monday. So
Monday morning, you can listen to Zodiac Monday with me, Ned Dehan of Black Box Online Radio. And on Monday afternoons, you can tune in for the panel discussion show where we all get together here on Mysteries with Mr. Belgique.
thank you very much, Ned. I hope to see you next year. Next year. Next week.
Next
and,
week, yeah.
and on Monday. Oh, Jeff, thank you very much. It's highly appreciated. Thank you very much. So yeah, we will see us on Monday and next week for another episode of with a new subject. And if you are already done, please subscribe. And I see you guys.
All right, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good night wherever you are. Take care, okay?
Take care. Take care of you. Take care of your loved ones. Bye.
Bye.